Hi guys, welcome back to Mysteries Channel. Today we're going to go over a story that was researched in the 90s for the most part. It kind of continued, but we'll get to that. Everything that's connected with this story was written about by a man named Gary Vay. Vay published a few articles about the discovery that he accidentally made, and I'm not going to lie, it's super interesting. This story connects the new and old worlds, bringing us together like so many other stories do. So let's go back to the 90s. Gary Vay is a computer programmer and also a part-time editor for a magazine called Viewzone magazine. And while he's working for this magazine, he's contacted by a man named Bill McGlone. He's an amateur archaeologist and a retired space engineer, and he came across some petroglyphs in the area surrounding La Junta, Colorado. And by looking at these different glyphs, he becomes convinced that this is an old world language. The petroglyphs, they were extremely old and they were covered in a very thick black patina. It's a kind of mineral that builds up over time on stone, and it takes many centuries for this to actually show up. So Vay, he flies out to go and take a look at these petroglyphs, and he wants to photograph them and do an article in Viewzone magazine. He gets there, and sure enough, he's seeing stuff too. And on a lot of these rocks, there's an older petroglyph in the background, and then many times a newer or younger petroglyph has been carved over parts of it. So he's like trying to get good angles to be able to see what is actually the oldest petroglyph that is on these rocks, and decides that he's going to accentuate them. He uses aluminum powder, mixes it with water, paints it onto these glyphs, and it's a safer alternative than using chalk, because once this aluminum powder dries, it just falls right off the glyphs, and in that way he's able to take some of these photographs. So they take these photographs, and both men do notice that the older petroglyphs seem to have these recurring symbols. Maybe something like an alphabet is what they're thinking. Vay spends a week at the location. He's photographing the glyphs, and as McGlone requests, he does publish the photographs and an article in Viewzone magazine. And in the article, he does ask if anybody recognizes this or knows more about the glyphs in this area, please contact him. And nothing comes of it. About a year goes by. Bill McGlone, the original finder of these glyphs, he passes away, and then eventually Vay gets an email. The email he gets is from a retired professor from Brigham Young University. The email was very vague, but it included a file of a lot of other photographs of very similar glyphs. Vay's excited, and he responds immediately like, ooh, where in Colorado are they? Are these near La Junta? And do you know what these glyphs mean? Well, the professor promptly replies to that email with even more photographs and states, no, not Colorado. These are from the Negev Desert of Israel. The professor's name was Dr. James Harris. Dr. James Harris was an expert on ancient Near East languages and was particularly interested in a collapsed turquoise mine containing inscriptions in what he believed was the same alphabet that were carbon dated to about 1500 BC. After seeing the article in Viewzone magazine, Dr. Harris was convinced that both sets of glyphs were possibly the same language or very much related to the same language. Dr. Harris offered to translate the Colorado glyphs and even shared an algorithm that he had with Vay. And this is kind of where it gets interesting. The inscriptions in Colorado made references to KNN or Canaan and YH, Yahweh. But he couldn't understand how this ancient language made it all the way across the ocean and in Colorado so many years ago. I'll tell you why, people. The damn timeline is off. We talk about it a lot. This is just further proof, right? So I know you're thinking KNN and YH, that's kind of weak sauce, right? But just remember, most Indo-European languages and even early Egyptian language didn't put vowels in their words. In fact, most of the inscriptions were just consonants, and then as you were reading them, you would place the vowels in yourself. So anyway, back to the story. Vay's in correspondence with Dr. Harris, right? And the letters keep coming. They're trading a lot of letters. They're talking about discoveries that are being made on both sides of the pond. And one of the letters that Vay receives from Dr. Harris is a whole new set of photographs taken from a very new excavation site in Yemen. It is believed to be the court of the Queen of Sheba. So a team from University of Calgary had uncovered the Queen's Palace after being buried in the desert for over 3,000 years. And the photos that he received were from press releases of this finding. They stated unknown language has been found on the wall surrounding an excavated court of the Queen's Palace. So quick rundown on the Queen of Sheba. Queen of Sheba is an enigma of a person. Some scholars don't even believe that she existed. Of course not. They're always questioning everything that has the most evidence anyway. But I do believe she must have existed, and she must have been pretty damn awesome. Why? Because so many cultures are trying to claim her. Everybody wants a piece of that action. A lot of different people seem to have known who she was in ancient times. The Old Testament. She is the queen whose name is not stated, that came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue, with camels bearing spices and a ton of gold, precious stones. In the Old Testament, it does state that never again came such an abundance of spices, and that she gave those to Solomon. She came to prove him with hard questions, and Solomon answered her satisfactorily. They exchanged gifts, and then she returned to her land. The New Testament. They call her the Queen of the South, and they state that she who came from the uttermost parts of the earth, or the extremities of the then known world, to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Early Christian scholars, while studying the Song of Solomon, which is in the scrolls found in the last section of the Tanakh of the Old Testament, speculate that she is the queen of Ethiopian descent. Now there's speculation because in the Old Testament they also say that she is Shulamite, or an Israeli woman from Shulem. It's hard to know for sure, but the more you look into it, the more evidence stacks up in favor of Ethiopia. Now, the Quran also speaks of her, and in this book, she is given an Arabian genealogy, and she is subject to a widespread cycle of legends. So, paraphrasing what the Quran says about it is that Solomon, having heard that she came from a place that worshipped the sun, sent a letter asking her to worship God instead. She replied by sending gifts, but Solomon kind of refused to take those gifts. So she ends up coming to court herself. His jinn are fearing that the king might be tempted into marrying her. They whisper to him that she has hairy legs and the hooves of an ass. Of course, this piques Solomon's interest. He needs to know, is she hairy with the hooves of an ass? He decides to make a glass floor built before his throne so that when she arrives, she has to lift her skirt to walk across it because it tricks her into believing that there's water in front of her. She lifts her skirt. He indeed sees that she is a truly hairy human and orders the jinn to create a depilatory for her so that, so that she didn't have to suffer from hairy legs. Anyway, all three of these texts do say that a woman comes to Solomon seeking knowledge and that eventually she does convert from her religion of worshiping the sun to the religion of Solomon's God. This would be the Jewish God, Yahweh. Now, the Ethiopians. The Ethiopian scriptures actually have a lot to say about the Queen of Sheba. The fullest and most significant versions of the legend appear in the Kabra Nagast. This is the Glory of the Kings, the Ethiopian national saga. Now, in Ethiopian, her name is Makeda. So here's what it says. Menelik I is the child of Solomon and Makeda, from whom the Ethiopian dynasty claims descent to this very day. According to this tradition, the Queen of Sheba, Makeda, visited Solomon's court after hearing about his wisdom. So in those times, King Solomon, he is seeking out merchants from all over the world in order to buy materials for the building of the temple. That's right, the temple. And among them was Tamrin. He is a great merchant. He is renowned, and he is the merchant of Queen Makeda, the Queen of Sheba. So he has gone up there, he has visited Solomon, and then he returns back to his land, and he tells the queen of the wonderful things that he has seen in Jerusalem and of Solomon's wisdom and his generosity, whereupon she wants to go and visit Solomon as well. She was greatly welcomed, given a palace for dwelling, and even received gifts every single day from him. Solomon and Makeda spoke with great wisdom. She was instructed by him, and she eventually converts to Judaism. Before she left, there was a great feast in the king's palace. During this feast, extremely spicy food was served to the guests. And as it was her last night and it gets very late, she ends up staying in the palace that night. They make a pact with each other. Solomon swears that he will do no harm unto her, and she swears that she will steal nothing from him. Very interesting, because all accounts show that she brings an enormous amount of wealth with her to Solomon as a gift. Why would she have to steal from him? It's just so strange, right? So as the meal had been extremely spicy, she wakes up in the middle of the night and she wants to drink some water. Then Solomon appears, reminding her of their oath, as if drinking water is stealing. I mean, this sounds super shisty, doesn't it? It really does. So she finally says, ignore the oath, just let me drink water. Never actually says what happens there, but she gets back to her land and she gives birth to a son whom she names Hohokum. Later on, he's called Menelik. He grows up in Ethiopia, eventually going to Jerusalem. When he goes there, he carries a ring, one of the gifts that Solomon had given his mother while she was in Jerusalem, to prove who he is. He is also received with great honors. The king and the people try to get him to stay there. While he's there, he ends up being anointed king by a priest named Zadok, and then he takes on the name David. A lot of things are happening in Israel at this moment. They're getting ready to get attacked. The priest that anoints Menelik into king, his son ends up stealing the Ark of the Covenant. So this kid didn't just do it because he was afraid. He says he was commanded by one of God's angels to do this. His name was Azarias. So Azarias offered a sacrifice as commanded by one of God's angels, and with much wailing, the procession left Jerusalem on a wind cart led and carried by the archangel Michael. It arrives at the Red Sea. Azarias revealed to the people that the ark is with them. David prayed to the ark, and the people rejoiced. They sang, they danced, they blew horns, flutes, they were beating drums. This is a huge deal, and it's probably a very scary circumstance to be in. Then they begin to go across the stormy sea. The ark protects all the people. They make it across over into what is now Yemen. It is also said in the Ethiopian tradition that when Solomon finds out that the ark is missing, he sent a horseman after the thieves, and he even chased it himself, but they could never catch up. Solomon returned to Jerusalem and then gave orders to the priests to remain silent about what had occurred, and that they were going to have to make a copy of the ark in the temple so that nations could not say that Israel lost its fame. It should also be said that a lot of Ethiopians see their country as God's chosen country and the final resting place of the Ark of the Covenant, and that Sheba and her son were the means of which it came to be there. I'll also mention Nigeria. They also lay claim to the Queen of Sheba. They claim that she was a wealthy, childless noblewoman of theirs known as Olayi Bilikisu Songbo, and they assert that she built a system of walls and ditches known as the Erido. She also shows up in Coptic legend. In the Berlin Papyrus, it states, "The queen, having been subdued by deceit, gives Solomon a pillar on which all earthly science is inscribed. Solomon sends one of his demons to fetch the pillar from Ethiopia, and it instantly arrives." Also in another Coptic poem, it says Queen Yesaba, this is important, Yesaba of Cush asks riddles of Solomon. We'll get to that important part in a minute here. Now back to the 90s. Vey is extremely excited. He tries to see if he can translate the Yemeni inscriptions with the program he created off of Dr. Harris's algorithm. He states that this was painstaking and it was frustrating work. Many of the pictures that he received had workmen and, people that were associated with the dig posing in front of it, and so he got every single picture he could find from any magazine, and he tried to get the most uninterrupted series of these writings together so that he would be able to start translating it. Also at this dig was a cylinder that looks as if it was once enclosed around a column. Interesting, right? The individuals of the alphabet had been mass produced, perhaps in wax, making it evident that there was movable type way earlier than we thought, right? Ancient tech forgotten. So at this point, Vey, he's receiving pictures from this man. His name is John McGovern. McGovern is an Australian who also agrees that the Yemeni inscriptions are very similar to Colorado inscriptions and to the Negev desert inscriptions. So at this point, Vey, Dr. Harris, McGovern, and many others are starting to find and believe that they have a very interesting find of historical significance. But Vey is not related to this field. In his findings, they are brushed away. And he says, and I quote, "No one would ever even speak to me. And if they did, they would mention Graham Hancock or even worse, Raiders of the Lost Ark. But eventually someone does listen to him. He sent his copy of his translations to the office of the president of Yemen. He was President Saleh, and this president actually sends him an invitation to come to the archaeological site." Let's go over Yemen and also Colorado. Yemen. It's a mountainous country about the size of California in the southern end of the Arabian Peninsula in Western Asia. It is bordered by Saudi Arabia to the north, the Red Sea to the west, the Gulf of Aden to the south, and Oman to the east. I'm not sure who is in control of Yemen at the moment. Wikipedia states that Houthi rebels control parts of Yemen since 2015, and a secessionist interim government council called the Southern Transitional Council since 2018 controls other parts, but I'm not even 100% sure on that. It does say that the country has been in a political crisis since 2011, and that this actually kicked off with the Arab Spring. In ancient times, Yemen was home to the Sabaeans. The Sabaeans were an ancient people of South Arabia. They spoke the Sabaean language, one of the old South Arabian languages. They founded the kingdom of Saba, which was believed to be the biblical land of Sheba. The Sabaean language group belongs to South Arabian subgroup of the Semitic branch of Afro-Asiatic languages. Even before the Sabaean culture existed, Yemen, with its long coastlines, was a very strategic ancient crossroads going back at least to 5000 BC. The Sabaeans, they established various colonies to control trade routes in this area. Evidence of Sabaean influence is found in northern Ethiopia, where Southern Arabian alphabet, religion, and pantheon, and the South Arabian style of art and architecture were introduced. They created a sense of identity through their religion. They worshipped El Maga and believed that they were his children. Also, the Sabaean kingdom built great irrigation works, including the Marib Dam, which supported their culture for over 1,000 years. Marib was the capital of Saba Kingdom, and it is believed that it is the land of the Queen of Sheba. The land of Saba, or the Sabaeans, also included parts of modern-day Ethiopia, or you could look at it like parts of modern-day Ethiopia controlled lands of modern-day Yemen. I mean, whatever way you want to look at it, it doesn't matter. Two lands today, one land back then, right? It was a very rich, powerful culture that even defeated the Roman legion of 10,000 men before reaching that capital city of Marib. It's funny too, because the Romans, they go on for it for a hot minute in their histories. The Sabaeans, they don't even bring it up. They don't even mention it because it was that inconsequential to them. So in 275 CE, the religion came to be that of the Jewish faith. And then around the 4th century, it becomes Christian. And then around the 7th century, it becomes Islamic. And that's where it has been ever since. Now on to Colorado. Colorado is a state in the U.S. Southwest. It is also mountainous, but it has no seas and there is little water. However, the Native Americans in this region in ancient times developed a system of canals and ditch work to irrigate their crops. These canals and ditches in some parts of the American Southwest are still used to this very day. In fact, parts of Phoenix actually still use these. Pretty freaking crazy when you think about it, right? So around 15,000 BCE, the Clovis and the Folsom cultures collide in what is now Colorado. Influences from these two cultures funnel into two different Native American kind of pathways. To the north, the Folsom, they are more nomadic and they are hunter-gatherers. And to the south, the Clovis, they settle down, build more permanent structures. They develop agriculture. They grow corn, beans, and squash. They build permanent and well-organized towns. This Clovis culture eventually becomes the Puebloan culture. And although we're just talking about Colorado here, this culture is also in New Mexico, Utah, Idaho, Arizona, even parts of Nevada. The southernmost part of Colorado, at the site of Chimney Rock, is an outlier to the great trading and religious center of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. Chimney Rock was one of the finest archaeoastronomy sites in North America. This same culture gave us Mesa Verde, the cliff dwellings that are all around this area. We do know that the Puebloans, the Anasazi, one of the more ancient groups that were here that later turned into the Hopi that are part of the Navajo, the long chain of people here, means ancient ones. There is another culture back here. The Hohokum were indigenous to Arizona, but definitely interacted with their neighbors to the north. The Hohokum translates as the ones who have perished, or were all used up. These people were also masters of the canal. Those Phoenix irrigation networks I was talking about were Hohokum. They were the most complex in ancient North America. Part of those canals were actually renovated by the Salt River Project and helped supply the city's water. Okay, so before I get to the translation, just remember, names are different because it's being recorded in a different place. So when they talk about the box of El, remember that their god was El Maget. The translators believe the box of El is the Ark of the Covenant. And when they talk about the Queen of Saba, obviously this is the Queen of Sheba. Finally, let's get to the translation from Yemen. Menelik, the only son of the Queen of Saba and Solomon, was depressed when he learned that his father's kingdom had been overcome and the temple in Jerusalem was sacked. His grief was deep. The happiness of the son was poisoned, and this worried his mother. Shortly after this invasion of Jerusalem, Menelik received word that the box of the Lord at El, formerly housed in Solomon's temple, was relocated for its protection. Now the text refers to an oath that was taken by Menelik to protect the box, apparently consummated by a ring that that was given to Menelik when he visited Solomon as a young man. Menelik also received a warning from Nathan, his half-brother, that the box could be harmful to his health and that it had caused vision problems and trembling when Nathan attempted to interact with it. Menelik retrieves the ark but has none of these adversities and eagerly interacts with the box of El, eventually constructing a special underground chamber where he stores the ark and converses through it with the Lord. And as the danger of invading enemies becomes real for the kingdom of Saba, Menelik announces that the Lord has instructed him to enter the underground chamber with the ark and to have the entire construction covered with sand to conceal it from hostile forces. Menelik informs his mother, Queen Saba, that he will remain buried with the ark for a prolonged period of time until a friendly nation is overhead. Following her son's instructions, Menelik is buried with the ark. However, his mother has a smaller chamber constructed adjacent to the ark chamber with a secret peephole so that she can monitor his condition. She secretly plans to open the chamber and rescue her son should he be in danger, and even has one of her chamber walls constructed without mortar for this purpose. On many occasions, the Queen Saba viewed her son inside of his chamber. She mentions that he received a future revelation from the ark, which sounded to her like thunder. And as she watches Menelik interact with the ark, she noted that he trembled. He shook from the visions that were shown to him. As time passed, the thundering noise and movement from her son ceased. Upon opening the secret peephole, the queen saw a worm crawl out. The queen was determined to open the chamber and rescue her son, but she recalled his faith and remembered his words, that he would be buried for a long time. She wept, cried oceans of tears, that his vision of the future also included the revelation that she had doubted his word and that she prayed that he would forgive her of her doubts. Now, determined to honor her son's wishes, Queen Saba has the chamber reinforced with more stone and mortar. She consults with the builders and masons to design an enclosure that would protect the buried chamber from future earthquakes, floods, salt, and other natural disasters. The chamber was made thus more sturdy, and a large dam was constructed around the buried chamber to protect it from floods and waters. The oval dam bears the story inscribed in the old language. The queen then dimmed her kingdom in Yemen and moved her entourage to Ethiopia. A copy of the ark was made, and she allowed the buried palace and courtyard to be consumed by the sands of the desert. Also, in the Yemen Museum, there is another stone which dictates the conditions that should exist prior to any attempt at opening the chamber. These include the occupation of land by a friendly nation and a warning that the ark must not be moved and should not be used for any national or personal benefit. The ark is to be used for the benefit of all mankind, and petitions asking for special favors to the Lord are to be made by collective prayer in the area of the buried chamber through the priests of the ark. Let's be real here. We know that in ancient times there was much more communication going on than we like to believe now. The cocaine mummies are a testament to that, right? They prove that trade happened between Egypt and the Americas in the very least. But probably other cultures were involved as well. Maybe the Sabaean culture. Maybe they were the merchants of it all. Like, that's what they were known for. Like, Ethiopia had a come up back then. Is it possible that the box of El is in the Americas? I personally highly doubt it. I'm way more leaning towards that it's in Yemen than it is in the Americas. But I think that this legend couldn't just die. This is a huge thing that's going on in the world at this time, and possibly these people left clues all over the world saying where it is. That's my guess. Before I leave, I'm going to leave you with some remarks that were left on one of the pages of Viewzone, the magazine that originally found this story and wrote about it. I have received many inquiries about this discovery. While we continue to receive photographic material from new finds in Yemen, we have decided to refrain from posting them. Why? Inevitably, some traditional archaeologists will attempt to argue about the methods of the translation or of the possibility of the scripts being found in various geographic areas. In our younger years, we would have debated these points and adhered to the traditional paradigm of journal publication. Instead, since the translations are relevantly important prophetic information, we have decided to focus all of our efforts on this task. Our goal is not academic or to achieve fame. In actuality, there is no time for that. A translation program which will run on any browser has been provided to validate our work. Thank you for your kind words and interest. Gary Vee. At the bottom of the description box, I just want you to know that I have also included his translation program. I've also included all of his Viewzone articles and anything else I could find that seemed like it was relevant to the story. I doubt anyone has actually watched this video to the very end because this one is rambling on and on and on. But if you did, thank you very much, and you guys have yourselves a very great day.